Hey everyone, so with the Ninth Age there's a couple of auxiliary army books also, and I've been wanting to try a couple of these out for some time now. But the Makar and the Asklander army books, I don't readily have the models available to play those. For the Cultists I actually might have, because I have a War Machine army, a Kriegs army that I'm going to make movement trays for so that I can play them as demons. And then together with the Dread Elves that I already have, I think it's going to be quite viable to play this cultist army. So yesterday I also had a test battle to see how the army plays in general, and I kind of liked it, but it's really a different play style, so that's really cool. So for this video I will just go through the book a little bit slowly, to just discuss what I think are good options or good ideas, and just to get a feeling for the army. Obviously I'll be focusing it on using the elf archetype of the army, but probably for the other archetypes there might be some useful information in this video too. Yeah, so let's go through the army just in general. So just like with demons, you have Aegis on certain models. Then you have this nobody expects rule. This is actually a rule that doesn't benefit the army too much. It's mostly that one of your opponent's characters gets fear, hatred and terror. So it buffs it up quite impressively, to be honest. Even though the fear and the terror are only applicable in this army to cultists core units that are garbage anyway, without any characters in them. But still, hatred is a big boost to any character. And then close combat attacks from models with Pledge to Darkness gain battle focus. So due to the small footprint of your character, probably you don't get a lot of hits on it from these units. Yeah, it's I think it's supposed to be a fluffy rule, but I think the hatred really takes it up to the next level for the opponent's character. So we'll see what happens with this rule over time. Then you have the enemy within. This has a bit of a higher impact to the army, so you do get a +6 modifier to the roll for choosing the deployment zone. I think this is mostly because the army is quite a passive army the first couple of turns, so that you can get the setup where you can play a bit defensively and not be exposed to your enemy army. The downside is that your opponent can just, in any situation, drop his entire army before you do, so get the bonus roll on the deploy. But you can mitigate this a little bit by considering what choices you have in your army, so that even if your opponent drops the first chance he has, he just gets a minor plus to the die roll instead of a +6 or more. But that would require you to just minimize your core basically and not take any of the possessed. Let's start the game on the board in the ritual altar. But we'll get to that later also. Then army model rules, demonic summon. So this is basically what makes the army. So you have a couple of models and units in your army that can summon units that you have already bought in your army list. And then this unit you can summon onto the table. So basically you start like with half of your army on table, then you have to discard fail tokens in order to get the rest of your army on the table. So this is quite a big disadvantage. On the other hand, you are allowed to put the chosen unit in a legal formation fully within 12 inches of the model that performs the summon. And you have normally in an army a couple of models that can do this. So basically you have a bit of this Helmor effect of Warriors of the Dark Gods, where you have units that can just appear at some point of the board, and your opponent doesn't really know when this happens and where this happens. So I think it balances out quite nicely. So if you're able to just fully commit to attacking, then you might be too early for the demon player, for the cultist player to react to it. On the other hand, you can build your army in such a way that you have multiple of these models that can do a demonic summon. And if you do so, then you have a bit of redundancy in your list, so that's not too bad if one of your units get killed early on. Then we have Pledge to Darkness. So, last thing about the demonic summon still. So in the first player turn, you can only discard 2 veil tokens, and 1 veil token equals 200 points of value, basically. So first turn you can only put up to 400 points up on the table, and second turn you can, and from there on you can put a lot of points on the table. But still, your opponent will likely start, so the amount of demons on the table at your opponent's turn 2 is still going to be quite limited. So you really give away the initiative to your opponent with this army. Then we have Pledge to Darkness. So these are the non-demon units in the army, basically. So they are normally not fearless. If you get a character joined to the unit, they gain fearless, and you can take an archetype. So for me, this is going to be the Wayward Children, because they have +1 advance rate, +2 march rate, and +1 agility, which just matches with an elven stat line, basically. So you start with a human stat line, you add this to it. And everything also starts on a 20 square millimeter base. If you go for the Fallen Heroes, the Orcs, you lower your agility, you increase your base size, and your resilience goes up. You have the Kinslayers, that are the Barbarians, I think, so you just go to bigger base size and you get extra offensive and defensive skill. And the Dishonored are the Dwarves, so that's basically the Dwarven rules. And then yeah, that's the archetype. So this basically allows you to play the army with a lot of different armies, as long as you have some demon models. And then we have the Sacrificial Offerings. This is, I think, mostly a fluffy rule, but it just allows you to once per magic phase, just once every single magic phase, per unit actually, to gain a +1 casting modifier with a mage that's in there. So I think this is also possible after. Oh wait, now I read the rule again. So it's immediately before performing a casting attempt. You already have to declare that you do this. So it's not like you roll your casting attempt and then afterwards you can declare that it has a +1. You have to do this before, which makes a big difference, because otherwise you could use it to just bump this 7+ to an 8+ if you need an 8+ for the spell to cast, for example. But I think it's a fluffy rule. You have a lot of cultists that you don't really care about, and just being able to stab one to get a +1 on your casting modifier is just a fluffy rule. The Hereditary is the Spear of Infinity, just as for Demon Legions. And then we go to the special items. So they borrowed some special items from some other army books. So they have the Locket of Senna, the Ledger of Souls from Warriors of the Dark Gods, the Scurrying Veil from the Skaven, and yeah, that's it. Then they have the Gem of Faith Tide. I actually don't really think this is really interesting, because you can just do it once, because you're gonna kill a champion with it, unless you you take a champion that has more than 1 hit point. So yeah, it is kind of interesting to cast a spell through your champion, basically like having some kind of Wandering Familiar of the Dread Elves, maybe, or the telepathic link of the Lizardman. So probably for occultism this would be an interesting choice. Maybe I would have to reconsider my army list. But then we have the Life Force Talisman. I think this is mostly for a Wizard Master on Thaumaturgy. You can +1 or -1 miscast modifier on the modifier once you miscast. So that's also quite good. but I think it's mostly useful for thaumaturgy because otherwise you don't really risk a lot of miscasts. The Scurrying Veil is really good. Yeah, the Fiendish Snares. That's also quite a funny one. So I think it's quite good in the army because it makes your army makes it more difficult for your opponent to come towards your army. And yeah, these first couple of turns can be really vital. So you can just have some terrain. Yeah, some terrain on your side of the battlefield that you can hide your army behind, and then the chosen terrain is dangerous terrain 2 to everything. So yeah, against some armies that's really potent, against some others not really. It's like against Threat Elves, I think it's quite a potent one, but against Vampire Counts it's not going to do a lot. Yeah, so then we have a list of demonic manifestations. That's basically all of the manifestations that you can get in the Demon Army book, I think. Then we have the characters. So here we start with the cult leader. This is the wizard master basically, and you can make him the general of your army. If you do, then you can make him the master of ritual. Then he gets this demonic summon rule. So then he is able to put the demons on the table, otherwise he is not. So you can only have one model like this because it has to be a general to have demonic summon. It also gains scout, and you have an 18-inch range commanding presence with discipline 9. So this sounds all really impressive, but then again the army doesn't have any BSB option, or but I don't think it's really reliant on discipline anyway. So here you just have the different options of the archetypes. You can take 100 points of special items, 200 if you're Wizard Master. 80 points for the Master of Ritual is quite steep, but I think you'll always take this. Then you can take Avocation, Occultism, or Thaumaturgy. In my test game I took Thaumaturgy, but I don't know if this is the best law. But we'll get to that later. And then we have the Demon Symbiote, that's the other hero choice. So this is basically a hybrid between, in my case, an elf and a demon. So he does get a 5+ Aegis, he is able to wear armor. He has 4 attacks at strength 5 at agility 6, with the elves this goes to agility 7. So that's quite an impressive stat line. Yeah, the only thing he lacks a little bit is offensive and defensive for a really awesome hero. He also is able to cast a little bit of spells, being a wizard apprentice, and you can make him a wizard adept on actually divination and avocation. So you do have access to divination in this army, which I think is really interesting. And he can take a single manifestation. So you can really go to town on this model and buff him up as far as you want. Or for elves, it's also quite viable to just buy him naked and then give him a spear. And then for 205 points, you have a guy with 4 attacks at agility 7 that goes to agility 9 when he gets charged at strength 5 with AP 4. So yeah, that's quite interesting. Still has a 5+ Aegis. Then we have the core. So the core is composed of non-demon units and demon units. And for the demon units, you have to actually summon these. So we start with the unit that just starts on the table, and they only have the cultists for this in core. So cultists, they are cheap as dirt. You can't put a lot of models in a unit, seeing how cheap they are. And you have 3 different upgrades for them. You can either make them infiltrators, where they can scout and lose scoring. You can give them an Eldritch Stone, they get Wizard Conclave and no Spear of Infinity. Or an Holy Conduit, and then you get the Demonic Summon, and you also get Channel 1. So I think for any cultist army it's really necessary to get this Unholy Conduit at least 2 times in your army, so that you have a lot of options of where to summon your models. The stat lines of these guys are just rubbish. So they have discipline 6. Remember, if you put in a cult leader in one of these units, they become fearless. But as long as there's no cult leader, they're just discipline 6. But then your general is gonna have a commanding presence of 18 inches. So then they will go to discipline 9. But they can't really work independently. They have 1 attack at offensive 2, strength 3, so they're really not built for combat. They're just there to either cast the Spear of Infinity, because you're looking at 105 points plus 40 points and plus 20 points, so that's 165 points for a Wizard Adept with Spear of Infinity, which is not even too expensive actually, and it comes out of your core points. That's actually also interesting. Then we have the Infiltrators. Then you look at 115 points for a unit with Scout, and you can give them throwing weapons then. So then you also have like 150 points of chaff basically. That Scouts and has throwing weapons. That's not too bad either. And you have this Unholy Conduit unit that summons stuff. I think that's one of the main strengths of the army. Yeah, so then we go to the summoned stuff. So yeah, here we just have the Lemurs, the Succubi, the Myrmidons, and the Imps. So yeah, this is quite funny. You can the only downside I saw in this is that all of these units are a little bit over 200 points as you start with them. So if they had been like 200 points on the dot, you could just field 10 models and then summon them for 1 field token and summon 2 of these units in your first turn. Because you're only allowed to use 2 field tokens in your first turn to summon. But like this, you cannot do that with these units. Actually, in the entire demon part of the book, there's not any great units to keep under or at 200 points or less to be able to summon them. So that's a bit of a shame. Yeah, otherwise you just have the Lemurs, the Succubi, the Myrmidons, and the Imps. So I think in your second turn it might be interesting to get a unit of Lemurs down, just to provide your lines with a bit of staying power. And I think that in general you're gonna get combat really soon with this army, because your opponent's just gonna run towards you basically, unless they unless it's a gun line, but then you don't really have any reason why to try to outshoot them with the imps. So I don't think the imps are a good option here, because you're basically losing your first volley. So maybe Myrmidons, Succubi, Lemurs. And out of Succubi and Myrmidons, I think I prefer the Myrmidons actually. Yeah, so then we go to special. So here we also have a couple of units that start on the table at the start of the game. So we have Possessed, we have the Ritual Altar, and the Profane Idol. The Possessed, they are really badass unit, I think. So mostly because they're really cheap. They have a low offense and a low defense. They're definitely not built to fight, or at least they were not designed to fight as warriors. But I think the fluff behind this is that they were cultists, and then yeah, they let their demons enter their bodies, so they actually become supernal. They do get an Aegis save. They are fearless, and they have 2 attacks at strength 4 base, but they can still get centipede legs for an extra advance, Chitinous skills for a 5+ armor, for a +2 on their armor save, or Red Haze for +1 strength. Actually, this Chitinous skills is also not too expensive. So I think for the elves, it's really cool to get the Red Haze, because then you have some strength 5 in your army. And if you combine it with a spear, you go to AP 3 standard and AP 4 if someone charges you. You have agility 4 that goes to 5 with the Wayward Children. So if someone charges you, you go to agility 5 with 2 attacks with strength 5. That is really juicy, even if you're just offensive 2. Remember, we have Avocation available, we have Divination available. So I think if you play these guys with Red Haze, with Spears, with the Wayward Children, You need divination, you need navigation to just make your hit roll better, and then you're just set. Because a unit of already 15 of these guys pushes out 20 strength 5 attacks, so that's tough to beat. They can't get a standard though, but they don't really need it. I think it's a cool unit, and it's really cheap. Like this completely pimped out unit doesn't even cost like 500 points. Yeah, then we go to the Ritual Altar. The Ritual Altar is something that I would really like to include in this army, but when I tested it yesterday, it didn't really do anything. I forgot it also has Demonic Summon actually, but it's weird because it's a model that you don't want to have in combat, but your opponent is going to go first. It doesn't contribute to you slowing your opponent down. So the only thing you can basically do with the Demonic Summon is to put it on a flank, and then once your opponent comes close, you put a unit in front of it that can hold the charge. But I think the main benefit of being able to summon wherever you want is that you can go out of your line of sight of your opponent and then counter charge with something that is really potent on the charge. So I don't really see the benefit of this unit after having played with it, even though I would really like to field it just for fluff reasons. Then we have the Profane Idol. I didn't really look at this as an option yet, but then I didn't really consider how much you start on the table with if you don't take it. So then if you don't take it, basically your battle line is composed out of cultists that don't do anything, and ideally 2 units of these possessed of 25. So you have 2 units that are scaring your opponent a little bit, but otherwise you don't have anything on the table to protect your flanks or whatever. So with that in mind, it might actually be interesting to get this guy, but 340 points is quite steep. That's basically, it is kind of like a giant, but it doesn't get the extra attacks if you get any wounds. Yeah, it's quite steep of a price for something with, yeah. It is fearless, it is supernal, it is nice. I would have liked it to get stubborn in some way, but it doesn't. You can get better armor, a little bit better armor. Yeah, I don't like this one. I think it's too expensive for what it does. Yeah. Okay, then we go to the Summon Demons, so that's maximum of 45%. I still have to look at this actually, if I don't reach this. So here you have a lot of demons. So basically you have all the demon choices except for the greater demons or the heroes. So yeah, this is one of the units that you are able to get under 200 points, but if you do, you cannot upgrade it with a lot of stuff. So you can give it any of these upgrades, but that doesn't really make the damage output of this chariot any bigger, because if you go to a Horde Treasure or a Legion Treasure, you're over the 200 points. So you only get one threshing engine with 2d3 strength 4 impact hits. I don't think that's enough to scare your opponent on the first turn, so I don't think it's really worth it. Eidolons, they're shooting, you're losing a turn of shooting, so I don't think it's worth it. Hellhounds, I think there's better options in general in the Demon's book actually, because a lot of people say that they are amazing against armor, but then you just have 3 strength 3 attacks with Lethal Strike. Sure, you have Lethal Strike, but you can also get Lethal Strike through Avocation Spectral Blades. With strength 3 you want the reroll to wound, so you want Spectral Blades anyway with this unit, so I don't really see the benefit of this unit, but I might be completely wrong here. Titan Slayer Chariots could be interesting. I don't know yet how well this army handles and it's nice, yeah. I don't really know how well this model or this army handles gigantic size stuff or towering presence stuff. This is quite good, so I might be tempted to actually get one of these in the army. because multiple wounds D3 against Towering Presence with D3 plus 1 impact hits at strength 7 really does some work. I would like to... Always with Demons I'm like, I would like to have this on it. Do I have this available? Because there's so many choices that you can't know anyway what it does anymore. I don't know, for example, Digestive Vomit does. Digestive... No, okay, never mind. So we were looking at the Titan Slayer Chariot. So Divining Snout gives you extra move distance against stuff with magic items. Segmented Shell gives you armor. Stiff Upper Lip gives you minimized roll. The Digestive Vomit is after you've charged. Centipede Legs is an extra advance. So might be really interesting if the army struggles with some gigantic options, some Towering Presence options. But then again, you can also just shove in a unit of Myrmidons with an Angel Jaw and then reroll to wound against it. That might also just do the trick. Mate Blight Gremlins, they don't get the ambush, so I don't think they're worth it. Even though they only have 4 wounds. Okay. They still do a lot of damage sometimes. Cloud Fiends are cool. I think they're mostly cool as just a chaff unit. But that might be me. Now we have the Hoarders. I think this is a really cool unit in this army, just because it locks up something of your opponent. So you can do it with the Lemurs from core, but with the Hoarders you can also just go to 390 points if you put a 4th model. You can summon them for 2 Veil tokens, so you can summon them on turn 2. It's really a roadblock for your opponent somewhere along your battle line, and they still do have some damage output. In contrast to Lemurs, that, well, you're just gonna get the same amount of wounds basically. But they don't. The Lemurs don't do any damage, and this is really something that your opponent can get stuck on. Sirens, you don't have any Vanguard because, well, you have to summon them, so I don't think they're worth it. The Blazing Glory, I think it's really interesting, just because you can put it on the flank, and then with the Cloven Hooves you get an extra, you get impact hits, I think, Cloven Hooves. Yeah, impact hits, teeth. It gains impact hits D3 plus 1 at strength 5 AP 2. So then it really ramps up the damage of this Blazing Glory. Where is it? Here. The Brimstone Secretions you don't really need. You just no. Bronze Backbone, what's that again? Bronze Backbone. Should be here. Hatred, yeah. Hatred is also cool, but not as cool as just having 2 guaranteed hits in addition to your attacks. Yeah, so I think Blazing Glories are really cool because you can also protect them through the Demonic Summon, because normally the way to get rid of Blazing Glories is to shoot them. If it's not on the table, you can't really shoot it. So it's gonna get into combat anyway. It's a single model, so you can easily fit it into some gaps in your army line. And you have a Demonic Summon anyway. So I think this is a really, really potent unit in this army. And I would like to include 2 actually. Then we have the Hope Harvester. It's a shooting thing. I'm not gonna go into that because I don't think shooting is yeah, it might be worth it to get rid of chaff, so, but that's the only way in which it might be worth it. I don't think the manifestations will help out a lot. You're already discarding a lot of fail tokens. You're also generating a lot of fail tokens, but you're also discarding a lot of them. And you don't get the extra fail tokens that normally demons get, so I don't think it's really viable. Brazen Beasts, they rely on the charge. Basically, you have ambush on the board anywhere you want, so this is really good in this army. This is really going to be good. Yeah. So that's really a choice that you would want. Centipede Legs, not really necessary. Incendiary Hacker, I wouldn't pick it. Shit ton of skills, you don't really have to worry about shooting. Whipcrack Tail is nice, but it's expensive. Red Haze is incredibly expensive, so I wouldn't take it. Also, you would like to keep the unit under 400 points, because otherwise you have to spend an extra fail token to summon them. So I would say just put on a musician, because this unit kind of needs a musician at times. So just put on a musician and leave it at that. Yeah. Then Furies could be interesting, just for this one turn where you have to chaff something up. But then again, you could also just put in some extra orders, but then Furies are way cheaper, of course. It's really funny how this idea of spending veil tokens on deploying your units has an effect on how you look at the army. Like, if you were to just deploy some Furies somewhere, or be able to deploy some Lemurs somewhere, normally you would really prefer the Lemurs. If you already know that you're going to be able to deploy them right in the face of your opponent. But then again, the Lemurs, they always cost at least 2 veil tokens to deploy, and the Furies, they only cost 1. So, because they're lower than 205 points. So that makes them more attractive. Then the Veil Serpents, I don't really think you need them, because you can get Riding Nightmares. One's on Discipline. Deceptive Glamour is still a really interesting spell to have, especially in combination with No Dot Enemy, because then you have 2 spells that can affect the agility of your opponent, just for these situations where you really want to go fast. Twisted Effigy is also really interesting. But then the champion is 130 points, so you go to 375. That is really expensive. 3 models that you are only going to use as a wizard conclave. I don't think I would choose this now. Bloatflies. They're 100 points a model, so that's really nice, because you can put in an extra model and then go to a steady 400. I've never played with those. I don't really know what they do. You get toxic hits. There used to be 2 toxic hits per wounding hit that you got, right? So they used to be really strong, and now they've been kind of toned down. I don't like the design of this, so I wouldn't get those. So that's the entire army. So this is the army that I played online yesterday. So as you can see, I have a cult leader who's a general wizard master on thaumaturgy. So having thaumaturgy kind of means like you need the Life Forge talisman, in my opinion, to be able to just tone down any possible miscasts. He is the master of rituals, so he does have the 18-inch commanding presence. That really helps out, and the demonic summon and +1 discipline. We have a cult leader wizard adept, because I wanted to try occultism in this army to see how it would play. I also included the fiendish snares and the ledger of souls. I think these fiendish snares are indeed quite valuable, but only against opponents where you only against opponents that actually care about this dangerous terrain. And yeah, there's some, but not all armies really care a lot. Then we have a demon symbiote who is a wizard apprentice on divination. He has a spear to go to agility 9 once he's charged. I put on blessed inscriptions to make his attacks a bit more valuable, and a whipcrack tail. In the end, this does cost like 115 points to get a reroll to wound and a +1 to hit. So I don't think this is valuable. So probably I should still change this. We have 2 units of 25 cultists. So here I have maxed out the cultists, and I was a little bit tempted during my game to also use them for combat. But then again, they're offensive 2, defensive 2, strength 3. They don't have any save, so they're really not meant for combat. So actually minimized sized units might be better. And then we have 10 lemurs to be able to just put in between something. And I found that in the game that I played, maybe lemurs are not really the best unit to use in this army, because you kind of generate your options that you have with the army through the demonic summon, and being able to put your units anywhere on the board. So the traditional role of holding up something is less needed. So the hoarders are way better at this because they still deal some damage also. Then we have the Myrmidons with Hot Blood. I found that Hot Blood isn't really necessary because you already have on the charge an agility of 5, I believe, which is already quite high. So against elves, Hot Blood would be nice, but then again, you have 2 units of Possessed with spears that go to agility 7 once you charge them. So you don't really need a Hot Blood, I think. The units of Possessed are really potent for the amount of points that they cost, so I would definitely always include this in your army. Then we have the Ritual Altar. The Ritual Altar is a strange piece because it's one of the units that actually starts on the table. So what you start with on the table are the units of Cultists, the units of Possessed, the Ritual Altar, and the characters. And the Ritual Altar is a piece that you have to protect during the game because in combat it has 7 strength 3 attacks. And it has resilience 3 also, I believe, with a 5+ Aegis. So it's not really potent in combat, and the units of fast cavalry can actually just still do some damage to it. So you really have to protect it, but you don't really have any pieces that you want to commit to protecting it, so it doesn't really work in this army. So I think it would be way more valuable if it would just go down in points and you remove just some options from it, just to make it a fluffy piece, basically. So if it, for example, was like 50 points and it could only cast Pentagram of Pain, was a Wizard Apprentice, can't do anything else, and is shit in combat and can't really move, then I think it would be nice. Pentagram of Pain is not necessarily something that you want to cast on everything on the board, because you're also affecting your own units, so for 50 points I think it would be niche. Then we have the Furies. I included them to be able to just chaff up something, and then later use the Furies if your opponent ignores them to chaff up something else. And I think they worked quite nicely, but probably there's other pieces that are more valuable. Then we have the Hoarders. So the Hoarders, they performed quite well, just because you can just find the matchup that you need for them. And then we have the Blazing Glory, and the Blazing Glory also performed quite well as just a piece that you can put on the flanks. So after this game I tried to optimize the list a bit further. That's this list. So we do keep the cult leader. He goes to Evocation instead of Thaumaturgy because Thaumaturgy doesn't really support your troops in combat, I found. So Evocation does do this way better. And then the Demon Symbiote with Divination Wizard Adept, he further buffs your own units, or he debuffs your he debuffs a bit more your opponent's units through scrying and through no die enemy, whilst Evocation only buffs your own units. So I might still take away his Blessed Inscriptions and the Whipcrack Tail for something else, but we'll see. The units of Cultists have been replaced by 3 units of 15, so I really am not tempted to put them in any combat. And then like this I still have the 5 channel that I also had in the previous list. The Myrmidons got an Unhinged Jaw instead of the Hot Blood, just to be able to cope a little bit better with large size models. And then the Possessed, they just stayed as they were. I included instead of the Furies and instead of the Lemurs some Brazen Beasts, because the Brazen Beasts, they really benefit from charging. And I think, yeah, this list is really nice for enabling them to do so. The only thing is that their footprint might be a bit big, so yeah, maybe you need to sacrifice a unit of Cultists to be able to get them in a nice place. Then we have the Hoarders. They have been stripped so that they are only 390 points. I think the 5th order wasn't really necessary, and the mirrored skills also not really, because you can get the favorable matchup anyway. And then we have the Blazing Glory unchanged. So I'm gonna try this one out and see how I like it. and I'll keep you posted on my experiences. So probably at some time I'll just upload a video of a battle report of this army, and then you will not be surprised to see the army on the table. If you have any considerations, please let me know. And also, I would really try to tempt you to also look into the Cultist Army book, because it's a great book. It's a really different playstyle, and it's really interesting to play with, and I think also against. And it's, if you look at the models, you can just base these models on whatever models you have already lying around. So if you don't own any demons, then you would only need the Myrmidons, the Brazen Beasts, and the Hoarders, and the Blazing Glory. If you do already own demons, then probably you already have the entire army just hidden in your collection. So that's it for this week. Please know if you have any comments or critique, or yeah, just let me know anything in the comments below. And I hope to see you next time.